The exploration vessel Xyreka's vision drifted cautiously through the abyss, its crew of seasoned alien explorers staring in disbelief at the readings before them. A Class 15 Deathworld. A planet so hostile, so volatile, that even the hardiest species in the galaxy wouldn't dare approach. The highest previously recorded classification was Class 12, a planet where the environment itself was an unrelenting executioner. But this was something else entirely. Captain Vexic's mandibles clicked anxiously. Confirm the readings. The ship's AI complied, running an analysis for the third time. The results didn't change. Extreme gravitational forces. Hyperactive volcanic activity. Megafauna exhibiting apex predator intelligence. Unstable weather patterns capable of obliterating cities in minutes. Every warning beacon in galactic history indicated that life on a Class 15 Deathworld was impossible. And yet, there's something else, Captain, the sensor officer croaked, his bioluminescent skin dimming in alarm. I think there's... He hesitated. Out with it. Vexic barked. There are structures on the surface. Silence fell over the bridge. Impossible, whispered First Officer Drellick. No species could survive that. The comms officer's trembling claws hovered over the control panel. Captain, I'm picking up a signal. Vexic's heart pounded in his chest. From what? The officer swallowed hard. It's a distress beacon. But it's not just any signal. He turned, his voice barely above a whisper. It's human. The descent. They should have turned back. Any rational crew would have. But curiosity is a predator, and Vexic had been in the exploration game long enough to know that a discovery like this could change the fate of the entire galaxy. Against his better judgment, he ordered the ship to descend. The moment they entered the atmosphere, the ship violently lurched, caught in a gravitational pull far stronger than any recorded Deathworld before. Warning klaxons blared as turbulence slammed the crew against their restraints. G-forces are at 4.8 times standard. Hull integrity at 72%. Lightning detonated through the sky, striking the ship's shields like plasma artillery. Gale force winds twisted and howled, forcing the vessel into an uncontrolled descent. Brace for impact. They barely made it. The Xyreka's vision groaned, metal screaming as it landed in the only clearing large enough to accommodate its bulk, a crater that looked fresh, as if something massive had recently impacted the area. Outside, the landscape was a nightmare. Towering, twisted trees stretched toward the storm-filled heavens. Jagged obsidian cliffs lined the horizon, their edges unnaturally smooth, as if something had cut through them like butter. Pools of bubbling, molten rock lined the ground, giving off a heat so intense it warped the air. And then came the movement. Dozens of them. Gleaming from the darkness of the jungle. Something was watching them. Vexic unstrapped himself. Prepare an away team. Drellick recoiled. Captain, we shouldn't. We came here for answers. Vexic interrupted, eyes fixed on the blinking distress beacon. We need to know. The first encounter. The moment the landing ramp lowered, the heat hit them like a physical force. It was suffocating, thicker than any breathable atmosphere should be, yet the beacon's transmission remained steady. They moved in formation, weapons raised. The jungle was too quiet, the kind of silence that only occurred when something was hunting. Then, out of nowhere, a massive creature lunged from the shadows. It was easily 3 times Vexic's height, covered in iridescent, chitinous plating, its mouth lined with rows of needle-sharp teeth. It moved too fast for something that size, closing the distance with an earth-shaking screech. Vexic had seconds to react. Fire. Their weapons lit up the darkness, energy bolts slamming into the creature's armored hide. But it didn't stop, it adapted. Its skin hardened, absorbing the kinetic force. It was learning. They were about to be overwhelmed when a new sound thundered across the battlefield. A gunshot. The creature's head snapped back, a hole the size of a melon punched clean through its skull. It collapsed mid-charge, the jungle floor trembling from the impact. Silence. Then from the shadows a figure emerged. A humanoid, clad in battle-worn armor. Ice cold, steady, unbroken. It spoke, and what it said froze Vexic's blood. Took you long enough. The human who lived. Vexic couldn't speak, couldn't process, because standing before him, alive and breathing, was a human. One who had survived on a Class 15 Deathworld. The impossible had just become reality. The human exhaled, lowering their weapon. Didn't think I'd see another alien face again, they muttered. Thought the galaxy wrote us off after what happened. What do you mean? Vexic finally managed. The human glanced at the dead predator at their feet. Then, with slow, deliberate movements, they pulled something from their belt, a small, charred flag. Vexic recognized the emblem immediately. The Terran Union. An empire that had supposedly fallen centuries ago. The human's eyes hardened. We never died. A shadow loomed behind them. Vexic's team barely had time to react before dozens of figures emerged from the treeline. More humans. Scarred. Hardened. Unyielding. We adapted. The storm overhead roared as if mirroring the fire in their eyes. The realization hit Vexic like a hammer. Humanity had been stranded here. And somehow, they had endured. The silence that followed was electric. Vexic and his crew stood frozen, their weapons still raised, but the human before them showed no fear. If anything, their eyes held something far more dangerous: understanding. The realization sent a chill down Vexic's spine. They weren't just survivors. They had adapted to this world. The human's eyes flicked to the Xyrek's vision behind them, then back to the team. Did the rest of the galaxy finally get curious, or are you just unlucky? They asked. Vexic cleared his throat. We detected a distress beacon. The human huffed, a humorless smirk playing at their lips. Yeah, that was me. Figured someone would show up eventually. Just took longer than I thought. Drelic's bioluminescence flickered anxiously. You wanted someone to come here? The human's expression hardened. Not just anyone. I needed someone to see what's happened. What we've become. And as if summoned by the words, the rest of them stepped forward. Dozens of figures emerged from the treeline. Humans. Some clad in makeshift armor, others in scavenged battle suits, all of them carrying weapons, far more advanced than any species stranded on a Deathworld should have. Vexic's crew stiffened. Their fingers hovered over their triggers, but the human in front of them held up a hand. Instantly the others stopped. They were disciplined. Organized. The leader turned back to Vexic. I assume you have a lot of questions. Vexic's mandibles twitched. That was an understatement. Humanity had been declared extinct centuries ago. Their worlds lost, their fleets shattered in a war the galactic community had long since buried in classified archives. And yet here they were. Not just surviving. Thriving. What happened? Vexic finally asked. The human sighed, glancing up at the storm-choked sky. It's a long story. Start talking, Drelic muttered. Because this doesn't make any sense. The human folded their arms. We were left here. Abandoned. Vexic's throat tightened. By whom? The human's eyes darkened. The Council. The words hit like a plasma strike. The Galactic Council. The ruling body of the known universe. The same council that had declared humanity's downfall a mercy. Vexic's stomach churned. They said your kind was wiped out. The human laughed, a dry, bitter sound. Of course they did. But they didn't kill us. They just threw us away. They gestured to the landscape around them. They thought this place would do the job for them. Drelic took a cautious step forward. What? What did humanity do to deserve that? The human smirk vanished. We won. The silence stretched. The storm rumbled overhead, casting eerie light across the cratered ground. The weight of the statement settled like a lead weight in Vexic's chest. We weren't supposed to, the human continued, voice tight. They made damn sure of that. When the war started, they stacked the odds against us. Superior fleets, advanced technology, overwhelming numbers. But we didn't die. We adapted. We learned how to fight them on their own terms. And then we did what humans do best. They leaned in, their voice dropping to something almost reverent. We got creative. Vexic had read about the war. Everyone in the galaxy had. Humanity had been a fledgling species, barely scratching the edges of interstellar travel, when they first made contact with the wider universe. The Council had seen them as dangerous, too unpredictable to be left unchecked. So they did what they always did, they tried to control them. It hadn't worked. Vexic's voice was barely above a whisper. You forced them to surrender. The human nodded. And they couldn't stand it. They couldn't let the rest of the galaxy see that the upstart species had beaten them. So they came up with a solution. Vexic swallowed hard. Exile. They made a show of our destruction, the human confirmed. They broadcasted the fall of Earth, the burning of our colonies. But they didn't want genocide on their hands, not officially. So they took what was left of us, the ones who wouldn't kneel, and dropped us here. Drelic inhaled sharply. A Class 15 death world. The humans spread their arms. The perfect graveyard. No one would question it. No one would check. They figured the planet would do their dirty work for them. A slow, creeping horror settled in Vexic's mind. This planet was never meant to be found. The beacon. His eyes snapped to the human. You activated the distress signal. On purpose. Damn right I did. Their expression was cold, but their eyes burned with something ferocious. We survived the worst place in the galaxy for centuries. And we didn't just survive. They reached behind them, pulling out a device Vexic had never seen before. It hummed with power, glowing with energy that didn't match any known galactic technology. We evolved. Vexic's pulse pounded. His crew shifted uneasily. The human gave them a grim smile. The council thought they'd buried us. But we've been waiting, watching, learning. And now, they lifted their weapon, aimed toward the sky, and fired. A column of energy erupted from the barrel, splitting the heavens. The storm above them parted instantly, the force shattering the permanent cloud cover that had choked the sky for centuries. And in that moment Vexic understood. This wasn't just a distress call. It was a warning. Humanity had been cast into the abyss. But they had clawed their way back. The Council's greatest mistake wasn't abandoning them. It was assuming they wouldn't return. The first wave of Arkrad shock troopers never stood a chance. The jungle devoured them with a brutal efficiency that only years of human survivalism could have engineered. The dense canopy shuddered as another barrage of plasma bolts rained down, but the humans had already moved. The terrain was theirs, the war was theirs. Corporal Vasquez gritted his teeth as he sprinted through the undergrowth, his boots finding perfect traction on the damp earth. His heads-up display mapped out every enemy movement, every heat signature. The Arkrad, lumbering beasts in their heavy exosuits, had no business trying to hunt humans in the wild. They were predators on their own worlds, but here they were prey. Echo Squad status, he whispered into his comm. 2 down, 4 remaining, came Sergeant Lee's reply, crisp and controlled. They're advancing blindly. Heat sensors must be useless with all this biomass. Confirmed, Vasquez responded. We keep this up, they'll be gone before they even realize we're hunting them. The Arkrad commander, a brute in gleaming obsidian armor, roared through his external speakers, his voice reverberating through the trees. You hide like vermin, the alien bellowed. Face us, cowards. The strong do not run. Vasquez smirked. That was their mistake. They thought humans ran. A glint of movement to his left caught his eye, an Arkrad trooper, creeping forward, pulse rifle raised. The massive alien's armor glowed faintly in the dim light. Vasquez didn't hesitate. He lunged, slamming a monomolecular blade into the weak joint between its shoulder plates. The trooper howled as Vasquez twisted the blade, then yanked it free. The body slumped to the ground, silent. Before the corpse hit the dirt, Vasquez was already moving. A massive explosion rocked the jungle to the east. Lee's voice crackled over the comm, that's 3 down. These bastards don't learn. Vasquez crouched, his eyes narrowing. Then let's teach them. Meanwhile in orbit, Captain Harding stood on the bridge of the UNS Perseverance, eyes locked onto the tactical display. The Arkrad fleet loomed overhead, a dozen capital ships positioned like vultures waiting to strike. But they hadn't fired yet. Why the hesitation? His exo muttered. Harding exhaled. They don't understand why ground troops are going dark so fast. They thought this was an extermination mission, not a war. The Arkrad warlord's face appeared on the main holoscreen, a beastly visage, tusks gleaming, eyes filled with rage. Human, you desecrate this world with your filth. Your kind has no right to exist on a Class 15 Deathworld. Surrender, and your extinction will be merciful. Harding leaned forward. You think this is your war, warlord? His voice was quiet, but the weight behind it was undeniable. You have no idea what you've stepped into. The Arkrad bared his teeth. We will burn this planet to ash. Harding smiled coldly. Then why haven't you? The warlord's expression flickered, uncertainty. The silence from his ground troops was gnawing at him. Harding pressed the advantage. You invaded a death world and expected it to bow to you. But you didn't realize something, did you? He leaned in. It's already ours. Before the warlord could reply, alarms flared across the Perseverance's bridge. Enemy ships locking weapons. Harding's eyes flashed. Then we hit first. Back on the surface, Vasquez's squad had maneuvered the last Arkrad survivors into a kill box. The jungle was alive with motion, shifting shadows, darting figures. The humans were everywhere and the Arkrad knew it. One of the surviving aliens, panting and wounded, snarled into his comm, they are unnatural. They fight without pattern, without fear. This world bends to them. His commander growled in frustration. Enough. Burn them out. The remaining Arcrad activated their flamethrowers, torrents of searing fire spreading in wide arcs. The jungle screamed as flora ignited. But as the flames roared, nothing moved. Silence. Then a whisper came from the darkness. You just gave away your position. The humans struck. Explosions ripped through the burning vegetation as precise sniper rounds punched through alien skulls. Vasquez sprinted low to the ground, closing the distance before the final Arcrad even realized he was there. The commander whirled, too slow. Vasquez's combat knife plunged into his throat. The jungle was silent once more. Vasquez exhaled, activating his comm, all targets neutralized. Lee responded immediately. Good. Because I think orbit just went hot. Vasquez looked up. The night sky was alive with fire. The real war had just begun. The jungle canopy trembled as the sky erupted in flame. Streaks of light, plasma bursts, missile trails, and the unmistakable fiery descent of wrecked warships painted the heavens in apocalyptic brilliance. Vasquez felt the rumble before he heard it. A shockwave blasted through the ground as something massive slammed into the jungle, throwing up a plume of fire and debris. The war had truly arrived. Echo Squad report, he barked into the comm. Still breathing, Lee responded. But we've got a problem. The Arcrad aren't retreating. More dropships inbound, way more. Vasquez swore under his breath. They were doubling down. A roar echoed through the jungle. Then another. Deep, guttural, and not Arcrad. Vasquez's blood ran cold. Tell me that wasn't. It was, Lee cut in. They woke something up. Another roar split the air and then the trees moved. Something massive, something ancient, was stirring in the darkness beyond their vision. The Arcrad had assumed the jungle itself was an enemy. They hadn't realized they had only met its lesser dangers. Until now. Above the battlefield in orbit, the bridge of the UNS Perseverance was a flurry of motion. Harding gripped the command console as the ship lurched from the impact of a direct plasma volley. Shields flickered dangerously low. Damage report. Shields at 22%, multiple hull breaches in non-critical sections. Harding clenched his jaw. This wasn't working. The Arcrad fleet had repositioned, forming an impenetrable wall above the planet. They weren't here just to destroy, they were here to take the world no matter the cost. They're committing everything, the XO muttered. They think we're still holding back. Harding exhaled. The Arcrad thought humanity had limits, that they still had more to give. They didn't realize humanity was already fighting like their backs were against the wall. He made his decision. All ships, he said. Fire control to manual. Strip our targeting safeties. I want all ordnance, all railguns, all missile systems unleashed at point-blank range. If they think we're holding back, we'll show them what happens when we stop pretending. His XO paled. That'll overload the weapon systems. We'll burn half our arsenal in minutes. Harding's eyes burned with defiance. Then we'd better make it count. On the surface, Vasquez barely had time to react as the ground split open. A titanic shape crashed through the jungle, ancient and terrifying. A Deathworld apex. The Arcrad had disturbed something older than any of them, something even humans had barely begun to understand. It was massive. Clad in natural armor, its hulking form moved like a mountain breaking free from the earth. Its eyes burned with primal rage. And it saw the Arcrad as invaders. The Arcrad commander turned, his plasma rifle rising. The apex didn't hesitate. With a single lunge, it crushed him. Vasquez and his squad scattered as the apex rampaged. Arcrad troops screamed as they were torn apart. Plasma blasts barely scorched the creature's hide. It was beyond their ability to kill. And humanity had learned long ago. You don't fight the apex. You move with it. Everyone fall back to the ridgeline. Vasquez shouted. Let nature handle the cleanup. The jungle became a killing field. The apex didn't just destroy the Arcrad, it hunted them. The few who managed to flee met another death waiting in the darkness. The jungle itself consumed them. And in the distance the sky changed. In orbit, the Perseverance opened fire. Without safeties. Without hesitation. A wall of destruction erupted from the human fleet. Kinetic slugs tore through Arcrad hulls like paper. Missiles found their targets with pinpoint precision. Every ounce of firepower was unleashed in a single, unrelenting barrage. The Arcrad fleet broke. Wreckage tumbled toward the atmosphere. The survivors, panicked, leaderless, began their retreat. Humanity had won. On the ground, the apex vanished into the jungle once more, leaving only silence and the scent of burning wreckage. Vasquez stood, catching his breath. His squad, battered, bloodied, stood with him. Lee glanced up at the night sky, now clear of enemy ships. We held them. Vasquez exhaled, nodding. We always do. Because this wasn't just a death world. It was home.